Hello, Bashar.
And you good day.
I'm Kasank, and I have a question about history and time.
Yeah,
So we live in three dimensions
you
of
live in
space,
four
and
dimensions.
okay,
Three of space,
and
one of
one at a
time.
time. Correct.
I
So,
know, that's why I said it.
so my understanding is that the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously.
Yes,
So is the past an absolute, or is it ever changing?
it's ever changing.
Is it a mass consensus agreement? The past,
It
or
can be,
it can be.
but
So
it doesn't have to be.
doesn't have to be. So then my question specifically is regards to suffering with, say, for example, Jews in the Holocaust, African
Yes,
Americans with slavery.
yes.
Um, is that a consensus agreement, or does that actually is that an actual history, or is that an agreement?
Well, it's both. It's this and that, not this or that.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, anything you can imagine is somewhere a reality because you can't imagine non-reality.
Correct.
I know.
Okay.
So the idea simply is, what reality are you perceiving based on the state of being you're in?
Okay, let's say, for example, that I'm a chain smoker and I'm not, and I decide to
You're
stop,
smoking chains.
and I decide to quit.
Yes.
So does that mean that my history changes because do I do I
It
shift into a
it
new?
can mean that.
Okay.
You can do it that way. That's what we have referred to as the 13th step. If you can wrap your mind around the understanding that when you change yourself in any way, you actually literally are a different person. And that means if you're a different person, you have a different history. Then that means that if you actually stop, just to use your word, and find that you have no urge at all to do it, that may actually mean you've become a person who didn't stop smoking. You've become a person who never did.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
And that's why the urge isn't there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally does. Yes.
But you have to be very aware of whether or not that's actually what you have defined yourself to be.
Okay. Does that mean I'm shifting to a parallel?
Absolutely. You're shifting your focus to another parallel version of yourself in this example that never smoked.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So if that is the case,
Yes.
then the history of like Hiroshima, the
Yes.
Holocaust, the
Yes.
slavery, that
Yes.
doesn't have to exist, is what you're saying.
It all exists. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of your history experience in terms of the effects. Nevertheless, you can still be aware of those things and still do what you need to do for yourself. It doesn't always mean you have to erase certain things from the idea of your history in order to be able to move forward in the way that you prefer to. If you shift and you're still aware of those things as part of what you call your history, then it may mean that those things don't have to leave your mind in order for you to do what you need to do. If for some reason it is absolutely relevant that those things are not a part of your history, then you would never even know they existed. If you shifted to a history where they didn't exist for you, you would also never know they ever existed as anyone's history.
Is that possible?
Yes. In fact, I'll tell you this. Many of you do this all the time. The history that you think you remember right now wasn't necessarily the history that was here a moment ago, but you'll never know that.
Mm.
Do you understand? Because you're making the new history your history, it will completely erase from your perspective any other history having happened because it wouldn't make sense. So when you shift and you do create different histories all the time, from this perspective in physical reality, you're never going to know what history was here a moment ago. But you've had a multitude of histories you now know nothing about.
But you remember a different time stream in history. You remember a different history.
You remember a different history, and therefore you will never know what history was there before.
Gotcha.
Make
Well,
sense?
makes
So the
sense.
history you remember right now is the history you're creating from the present. And a moment ago, this wasn't your history.
Oh, deep. Okay. Okay, my last question. So
I'll
those,
give you an example if you wish.
sure, yes, please.
And I'm going to come at this from a little bit from the consensus reality point of view, just because that's the subject we're on today.
Okay.
One moment. We're scanning the timeline. In 1996, or what you call or remember as 1996, you shifted your history to such a degree that the history that was different before you shifted in 1996 was different to the degree, just to give you one example, that your President Kennedy was still alive up to 1984. You understand what we're saying now?
Yeah.
Previous to 1996, or what you remember as 1996, you had a different history in which President Kennedy was alive until 1984.
Hmm.
But now you don't remember that history.
Oh, okay, deep.
You see what we're saying?
Yes, yes,
You
definitely.
now have a history where he died in 1963.
Wow. Okay. So, with that, my final question is: those victims of these atrocities, how can they? Because some people are still suffering
Yes,
from
yes,
the
yes.
Holocaust. The African Americans are suffering from police brutality.
Yes.
How do they transcend that? Is that by
It
shifting
can
to a new
always
reality?
be transcended by understanding that no matter in your world be learned, if only the lesson of learning how to ensure that they never happen again. Make more positive choices. Learn from the things you don't prefer in your society how to create a different society that you do prefer. That's how you can use these things in a positive way. Anything negative can be used in a positive way if you're willing to. And if you're willing to understand that the fact that they occurred in a negative way can be used as a lesson, if only to teach you to not do that again,
Okay,
if you don't prefer it.
so then can those groups then have a mass consensus to where they're in racism, sexism, and
Of course they can.
anti-Semitism? And
Of course they can, because you have mini mass agreements within the overall mass agreement.
okay, so
So groups can have their own experience as well as individuals can have their own experience within the mass consensus.
and that can shift to a different reality.
Absolutely. And
Awesome,
it does all the time.
awesome.
It's just, again, that if many of you are choosing to experience certain things because sharing that history will give you an opportunity to work with each other in a certain way and to help each other in a certain way make more positive changes, then you'll all agree to maintain that kind of common history in order to do that. Yes?
Yes.
All right. Does that help?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.